Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, who is bogged down in a war against Ukraine, is also having problems in Syria. Local militias have launched a major offensive west of the major city of Aleppo in Idlib province. The defense of the Russian Assad troops has collapsed near Aleppo. The militia is conducting a successful offensive and is already 7 kilometers from the city. This was reported by the Russian Z channel. Alex Parker returns close to the Russian armed forces. He claims that the offensive is being carried out by militias supported by Turkey. When the movement began, the troops of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad fled, abandoning their weapons and equipment. Russian special forces tried to contain the breakthrough, but without much success. The Russian armed forces suffered serious losses and some soldiers were captured. As for what happened in Syria, they were absolutely unprepared for the breakthrough. The Arab partners of Assad's troops simply abandoned their heavy equipment and started running away. As a result, the militants received tanks and heavy armored vehicles. Our special forces, either from the SSO or the GRU, were sent to break through and they suffered losses. The Z channel wrote, Syrian rebels are advancing near Aleppo, putting dictator Bashar al-Assad's government forces to flight. Some sources say a Russian army plane fighting on Assad's side mistakenly struck the dictator's retreating forces, BSSI writes. Despite the fact that night has fallen in these latitudes, the operation continues. The rebels are trying to develop and consolidate their success. Their sources continue to report about new liberated villages. The report says, Russia has been fighting in Syria for almost 10 years on the side of the local dictator Bashar al-Assad. Recently, large militia forces began an offensive on the territory controlled by the regime and have already achieved significant success. The Syrian rebels decided to shake off the old ways and began an offensive operation, liberating the first 7 settlements west of Aleppo from the hands of the Assad regime, IDF officer and military observer Yigal Levin reported. He specified that there was a noticeable stir in the ranks of the Russian military on this matter. Moscow began actively using its aviation to strike the militias. Assad's troops are also shelling enemy positions with artillery. Serious battles are underway. It should be noted that, according to Levin, a group of Russian soldiers could have been destroyed in this section of the front. Following the battles, the militias demonstrated trophies, very sophisticated weapons which the Russians were probably equipped with. There are rumors that some detachment of Russian soldiers was allegedly dismantled. At least such assumptions are being made, judging by the captured guns, the soldier wrote. There are also reports that the Fauj military base has come under the control of the rebels. Military analysts publish a map showing the change in the situation on the battlefield in favor of the opponents of the Assad regime. It shows the territories that have come under the control of the rebels in recent days. Assad's forces are made up of various groups. They include Iranians, Iraqis, Afghans and Hezbollah fighters. After Hezbollah left for Lebanon, there are not enough Iranians for the entire front. former German Chancellor Angela Merkel has accused Vladimir Putin of exploiting her fear of dogs as part of his power games during a meeting with her at his Black Sea resort. In extracts from her book, Freiheit, published by German newspaper Die Zeit, the former German Chancellor said the encounter was typical of the Russian leader's tactics. Merkel recalls being kept waiting by Putin at the Group of 8 summit she hosted in 2007. If there's one thing I can't stand, it's unpunctuality. And she recounts a visit to the Russian Black Sea resort of Sochi that year in which Putin's Labrador appeared during a photo opportunity, although Putin knew she was afraid of dogs. Putin appeared to enjoy the situation, she writes, and she didn't bring it up, keeping, as she often did, to the motto, never explain, never complain. Putin has claimed that he brought his pet out to make the former German leader feel more at ease by doing something nice for her. The previous year, she recounts Putin pointing to wooden houses in Siberia and telling her poor people live there who could be easily seduced, and that similar groups had been encouraged by money from the US government to take part in Ukraine's Orange Revolution of 2004 against attempted election fraud. Putin, she said, added, "I will never allow something like that in Russia." Merkel says she was irritated by Putin's self-righteousness in a 2007 speech in Munich. "I sat in the front row and could closely observe Putin during his speech. He spoke quickly, sometimes freely, likely having written most, if not every word himself," she describes. Merkel was particularly irritated by Putin's self-confidence, as he did not mention unresolved conflicts at that time in Nagorno-Karabakh, Moldova, or Georgia. Some parts of Putin's speech seemed absolutely absurd to her. The former chancellor writes that in the Munich speech, Putin showed himself to be exactly as she had imagined. "I perceived him as someone always on alert to avoid bad treatment for himself and always ready to pounce on others. You may consider all this childish, condemnable, but you may shake your head. But it did not remove Russia from the map of the world," Merkel states. In her book, Merkel also noted that many countries in Central and Eastern Europe simply had no incentive to invest in relations with Russia. According to her, they seemed to want the country to simply disappear. But Russia, well armed with nuclear weapons, existed. It was and remains geopolitically indispensable, partly because, together with the United States, France, the United Kingdom and China, it is one of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council with veto powers, says the former chancellor. As she has before, Merkel defends a much criticized 2015 peace deal for eastern Ukraine that she helped broker and her government's decision to buy large quantities of natural gas from Russia. And she argues it was right to keep up diplomatic and trade ties with Moscow until she left power. In another extract from the 700-page memoir, Merkel also addressed her dealings with an emotional Donald Trump, who was apparently fascinated with the Russian president. She said his main aim was to make the person he was talking to feel guilty. At the same time, I had the impression that he also wanted the person he was talking to like him.